I'm going to start off by asking a question, because you can go to that mic there. I'm going to start asking a question to Pinchas first, and then I'll open it up to the audience as well. So my question for you, Pinchas, is, when did you start speaking about the Holocaust for the first time? What was that journey like? Because obviously there was a time where you weren't talking about it. And when was the first time you started sharing your story?
The first time that I started thinking about sharing these stories, I have no idea. And basically what actually happened, I can tell you when I really started. And I'll tell you a story. You know me. You ask me a question, I tell a story. And the story is as follows. I had a habit. We lived in Luxembourg. And I had a habit, I used to take the train, go early in the morning, go have a swim, and then on the beach, and then go to work. Sundays, yeah, in South Africa. Sundays, it was like a half an hour from Cape Town. It was a beach resort. It wasn't a very expensive one. It was quite, at that time, it was quite a cheap one. And on Sundays, I used to walk with my youngest daughter, who was then about 5 years old. And I used to tell her stories. And the stories that I used to tell her were about all kinds of things, from the Bible, giants with 7 fingers and eight tongues and horns and God knows what. Everything in my imagination, I would tell her all kinds of stories. And then we sat down on the beach, and she said to me, "You never talked to me about your mother. I want to know about your mother. Speak to me about your mother, about my grandmother, your mother." So I thought to myself, I will. So we sat down on the beach. I was watching the ocean, and she was watching the ocean. And she might not remember this, but I was starting to tell her the story of my mother. And I must have started telling her about the Warsaw Ghetto, that she never smiled, things like that, which were not very happy. Suddenly I looked at this child, and there were tears streaming from her eyes, and she had her fingers in her ears. And from that time, I stopped talking about it completely. And I did, Dorothy knew about me being a Holocaust survivor. I had nightmares, so, I had all kinds of problems with being a Holocaust survivor. But at the same time, the first time that I really started talking about this is, there's a woman in Toronto, a very famous one, called Paula Draper, and she's a member of the synagogue. She's a historian, and she was taking testimonies from people. Somehow she learned that I was a Holocaust survivor, and she phoned me at least a half a dozen times trying to get me to tell my story. And I said no. I said, no, I don't want to tell the story. I get nightmares, I don't want to do it. Eventually, she said, "Can I come and have tea with you?" I said, "Sure." So she came and had tea, spent about an hour talking to me, and I agreed to do it, and she did a 4-hour videotaping of my story. That is the first time that I actually started telling about what happened, and I gave each one of my children a copy of these stories, and they then learned much more about it. And I think from that point of view, it became easier. Then I met Stephen Smith in '98, and he did another interview with me, quite a couple of hour interview, and then he persuaded me to take my whole family, Lauren, who's here, Jan, Rumi, my whole family, Dorothy came, and we all went together to Poland in 2002, and he made a film called The Void. And I think that was a kind of cathartic moment for me to be able to open. And then you approached me to go on March of Remembrance and Hope and other things, and this is when I started talking about it. So from a very short question, I told you a long story.
Thank you. Some questions from the audience for Pinchas, please. Go ahead. Who's that?
My name is Robin. I was wondering if you could speak about your experience when you began to learn more about the First Nations experience in Canada.
I didn't hear.
She wants to, the question is, when you first learned about the First Nations experience in Canada, what was that like? When you first learned about what happened to the First Nations here?
Well, you know, once I started going on the March of Remembrance and Hope, we always had somebody from First Nations. And the person that I actually bonded with mostly was with Jules. Jules and I, we had quite a kind of fighting experience because she was a very feisty and difficult person, you know, to be on the trip. And so we had a kind of quite a relationship going on. And we became very close. And one of the things which I tried to persuade her, which I had this idea that we should create a March of Remembrance and Hope for Canadians to go into reserves, to go and meet Holocaust school survivors and the elders and tell the stories to Canadians who know nothing about it, just as I didn't know anything about it. I learned it on the March of Remembrance and Hope. I had some chiefs, I had some elders, we had some ceremonies. I started learning about smoking the grass and all these things, and it meant quite a lot to me. And it actually touched me very much. So I tried to get Jules to try and organize it, but unfortunately this was quite a difficult thing to start. You know, there needs a lot of money. She tried very hard. And the next thing is she asked me whether I would do the film together with her mother. And the film actually is about her mother. And, you know, and it's very important, you know, actually to think about the First Nations when you see this short, wonderful little film about her mother who tried very hard to open up her heart. It was very difficult for her. As a matter of fact, I will share something with you which maybe she wouldn't allow anybody to be in the room when she was being interviewed except a videographer. I mean, you know, when I was being interviewed, you know, anybody could be there, but she wouldn't. She was so, you know, shy and scared and difficult. It was so difficult for her to bring it out. And what's more, this morning I was on a panel with another First Nation person on the Legacy Symposium, and I spoke to her, and I asked her, why is it so difficult to get First Nations people to talk about it? And they said that it's the way, the shame they feel of what they were experienced to. And when she told us what she actually experienced herself, she is a survivor of the school system, you know, I can understand it. It's very, very difficult to talk about things like that. And I really feel sad that we can't do, I wish we could organize a March of Remembrance and Hope and get Canadians to go at least once a year, a couple of buses, go to Sudbury, go wherever there are First Nations people with stories while they're still around and tell it themselves, just like Holocaust survivors do when they go on the March of Remembrance and Hope or March of the Living.
Any more questions? Go ahead.
I'm just curious, sorry, Walden,
I beg your pardon?
I know you discussed at some other point your history.
You want to ask some questions?
I would love to know where were you educated? You speak so well.
Where were you educated? You speak so well.
I speak so well.
Where were you educated?
Where I was educated. I'm self-educated. I never had the chance to go to school. So when I lived in England, can you all hear me? Or must
Use the mic.
Use the microphone.
You want the
Use the
mic?
microphone.
So what actually happened was when I was in England, I started off by being in a Hasidic orphanage, but then I changed and I stayed with the family and I boarded with them. And one of the things I did is I used to go to the library and collect books to read. And the librarian got to know me very well. And she knew quite about me. We had long discussions. And every week she prepared 10 books for me to read. And I started educating myself by just reading. And I've been reading since that time on. So most of my knowledge comes from self-educating.
Thank you.
Well, back here, Ellen.
Yes, go ahead.
Pinchas, I don't know if many people know about the hologram
Oh, yes.
project that you're involved in. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about it.
So she wants you to talk about the Steven Spielberg's hologram project, which you're involved in.
In 2012, I was approached by Stephen Smith, the chair of the Shaw Foundation, whether I would be prepared to get involved in a pilot project to start a hologram which is interactive. In other words, you can be on the stage, you're not there, but you can actually interact with people. It's never been done before. You know, holograms have been done many times before, both for training purposes. They've been done with puppets, they've been done with all kinds of other, figures, which are imaginary one drawn, and for training army and so forth. And I saw some of them, but they've never done an interactive one where you could actually sit and say something, and then people ask you questions. And the engineers at the University of Southern California were very skeptical about whether that can be done. So he asked me to come down to California, and I came down, and I spent the whole day with about half a dozen or more engineers, with I don't know how many cameras on me, and they asked me many, many questions going over and over and over. And subsequently, they decided it was worthwhile trying to do that. And they did. It took 3 years. It took from 2012 to 2015. That in 2015 to actually perfect this. And eventually I finished up by actually answering over 2,000 questions. I answered questions in Polish, I answered questions in Hebrew, because they wanted for different places. And eventually, in the first time, it was shown in Illinois, in the Chicago, Holocaust Education Museum, and it was very successful. Recently, it was in the Sheffield Film Festival, where it won both the prize for the public prize and the main prize. And it's been all over now. It's now been opened in New York in the Jewish Heritage Museum. It's been here, as you already know. Some of you may have seen it. And I think it's a very important tool for future interaction with Holocaust survivors. And it's coming again. I think it's here now. There are me and another 3. They actually took another 3 interviewees, Holocaust survivor, which they actually brought with them.
So just so, I'm really worried about Pinchas' safety because this has happened before. So just so you're clear, this is Pinchas, it's not his hologram. So please don't go over and poke him. It's really him, okay? There we go. Okay, another question, please.
Right here. Hi there. First of all, thank you for doing this. This is amazing. Thank you so much. I wanted to know whose idea, first of all, was it to make this, to collaborate on this film? Hers or yours?
It was Jules' idea. She's a filmmaker. It was her idea to get together, to get me together. I think it was the relationship that we built up over the 10 days that we were in Germany and in Poland that I think allowed her to think in terms of that. That she and her mother could actually create something worthwhile. And it was purely her idea. And I think that film is actually a film about the First Nations. I mean, I play actually a secondary role as far as I'm concerned.
I think you were both.
Can I ask, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, when I was in Pinchas, I was like, he reminds me of my grandpa.
Mine too. I never saw him, but it
was like hanging out with my grandmother. So, but my grandmother didn't speak English; she only spoke Greek. So I really wanted my mom together because I just knew that my mom would open up more, and she did. And my mom actually made moccasins for him. So, it was a really special film, but it was also a very special experience, bringing them together. My mom didn't very much, But Pinchas failed, or he's my pusher. My grandpa.
You know, I haven't worn these since then. I keep them in a special place, and they're very important to me.
That's a quick question. Have you been to Israel together?
No.
No, we haven't been to Israel. We went on the March of Remembrance and Hope that goes to Germany and Poland. It's students from all over different universities in Canada, and it happens in May after, postgraduate students after their exams.
Okay, two last questions. Sorry, go ahead. One. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you both. One of the biggest discussions that are taking place right now is about intergenerational trauma, not only within Indigenous communities, but also with families of Holocaust survivors or families of any genocidal trauma. And I'd really like to know, Jules, what the impact of your mother and also telling these stories has been on you and your generation to use this for healing within your particular generation and going forward. Because it's one thing to inform the general public, but there's also something that obviously must be happening within each of your communities and the families and the larger communities that you belong to. I'm wondering if you can comment on that.
Yeah, so I'm the daughter of a doctor, and I think we're not scratching the surface in terms of intergenerational trauma. I was raised by a woman institutionalized, so my childhood was pretty rough, and we really haven't had an opportunity to talk to that experience. And that's where we think cross-cultural healing needs to happen, where we can learn from each other. We can learn what works, or try new things, or I'm just at the point of articulating my own experience. But what's really hard is that I don't want to hurt my mom, if that makes any sense. Because there was a lot of stuff that happened in our household, and I know why those things occurred, but I just feel like she's so fragile, and I have to carry the weight of that. So I don't know really what to do. So I just kind of took myself through writing and film and reaching out to people in-house. Because he understands when I'm talking, he gets it. When I talk to my mom, her walls go up, and she has a hard time telling me what I need to hear. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's why I think it's so necessary that we have these conversations, these discussions, with us as an children of survivors. We have a lot of stuff that we talk about too, and we need to put it in a safe place. And we got to be careful not to hurt our parents. I just don't know how to do that yet. So I think that's talking about reconciliation in Canada. I don't know. We still got to figure it out within our family.
Can I ask?
So I guess.
Thanks, Jules. We have two more questions. I'd like to ask a question to Pinchas and Jules. How you can't? It was very expensive to put together a whole program, but how widely spread can we make this little film? How widely spread can we get it?
Well, I can answer that, Jules. The film is available through V-Tape distribution, and we rented it.
Organization.
Excuse me?
What's that?
We had to rent the film from V-Tape distribution, correct? That's where that's where we can see it, right? So if anybody wants to use the film, they have to go online and order it from V-Tape distribution, right?
Yeah, which is an artist-run organization. So they support artists. It's an amazing company or for-profit in China, and they have amazing films. So it's a great list to check out this.
And the price is
prices are quite reasonable.
Yeah. And we get a little bit of money as artists.
Okay, I think we had one last question before we do our closing part of the program. We have one more question over there? Go ahead, please. Please stand up.
Hi, Jules. My name is Heather Chidinway from Oklahoma. It's a reserve 6 hours away from Toronto. And I just found the film very touching, how the stories relate. And I find it really interesting that this would be something that you've utilized or that you've helped to actually help your mother express. Because it was almost like, it's not like she didn't have a choice, but there was like a little film being made, right? So that's part of like her healing to be able to do that. And I find culturally, with our people, they're already really, really shy. And yeah, so like, and I think with residential school and the things that happen and just colonization in general, that it makes it extremely harder because with the shame and being shy, it's it's like a double whammy, like it's very hard. And I know culturally, like even like our traditional stories, we are so shy that when the Creator lowered us to the earth, as He lowered all the different peoples to the earth, we kept looking back because we wanted to stay with Him, and because we're too shy to even come to the earth. So it's like a cultural thing. So I really understand when you say, or even when you spoke about asking her about why she was being really very shy. It's because it's already a cultural characteristic.
Yeah, and I think also her trauma in when she was a small child. So that's during developmental years. So a lot of that trauma in residential school happened when they were small and they were taken away from their families. So there's a lot of things. As a mother, I can't imagine someone coming in and taking my kids away. Anybody really can. It's heartbreaking for the whole community. So that shyness is also, I think my mom walked away with about a grade 3 or grade 4 level education, spending 11 years in school, and so my mom went to St. Anne's, which is one of the worst residential schools today. So I just, she's getting more and more comfortable talking about it, but like I said, the story was so fragmented. As a child, I remember her, she would tell me a story, and the next day I would ask her, and then she would get mad at me for bringing it up. But then she would talk about it again, and then I was so confused as a kid because nobody was talking about that. So I'm like, why are you telling me these people's stories, Mom? And then she would get angry again. But that was how she shared the story. So I was always curious, but it really strengthened her relationship, and it was so.
Well, thank you, Jules. I think this leads us to our next little film clip. So, Jules, we're going to thank you and say goodbye to you and your very spoiled cat. And we're going to show you another clip now. So, Silvio, thanks, Jules. Thank you very much. Big hand to Jules.